Freemasonry presents itself as a system of morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. At its core, it is a fraternity that seeks to bring together men of good character, regardless of their personal religious convictions. A fundamental principle, however, is that every candidate for admission must profess a belief in a supreme being. This requirement is intentionally broad. It allows a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, or a follower of another faith to meet on common ground. The term used is often the great architect of the universe, a neutral and inclusive title that avoids specifying any single religion's deity. This concept is central to Masonic philosophy, aiming to unite men who might otherwise remain at a perpetual distance. The lodge room is intended to be a sacred space where religious dogma does not create division. While a holy book, referred to as the volume of the sacred law, is always open during meetings, its specific identity depends on the faith of the members present. In a lodge in London, it might be the King James Bible. In a lodge in Tel Aviv, it could be the Torah. In Istanbul, it could be the Quran. This practice is designed to show respect for individual belief systems. Freemasonry does not offer its own theology or a path to salvation. Instead, it provides a framework for moral and ethical development, using the tools and symbols of stonemasons as allegorical guides for building a better self and a better society. This principle of religious tolerance was quite revolutionary when Freemasonry began to flourish in the 18th century. In an era marked by intense religious conflict and persecution, the idea of a private society where men of different faiths could gather as equals was radical. The lodge became a unique social laboratory, a place where the ideal of enlightened tolerance could be put into practice. The focus was not on what a man believed about the afterlife, but on how he conducted himself in this life. The fraternity emphasized virtues like truth, charity, and brotherly love, believing these were universal values that transcended the particulars of any single creed. It was a bold experiment in social cohesion. However, this very inclusiveness has been a source of misunderstanding and criticism. To outsiders, the idea of treating all religions as equally valid paths to a single, unnamed supreme being can seem like religious indifference. This is a charge that has been leveled against the fraternity for centuries. For Freemasons, the goal is not to diminish any particular faith but to find the common moral ground that underlies them all. They argue that by focusing on shared ethics, rather than divisive doctrines, they can foster a unique kind of harmony. The lodge is meant to be a sanctuary from the religious and political quarrels of the outside world, a place to practice a universal brotherhood. The relationship between Freemasonry and the Catholic Church has been one of consistent and severe opposition. The Church issued its first papal ban against Freemasonry in 1738, with Pope Clement XII's bull, In Eminenti Apostolatus Specula. This condemnation has been reiterated by numerous popes since, and the official position remains unchanged. Catholics are forbidden from joining Masonic lodges, and doing so is considered a grave sin. The Church's objections are rooted in fundamental disagreements over theology, authority, and the nature of truth. It views Freemasonry as a rival system that promotes a view of the world incompatible with Catholic doctrine, a form of naturalism that places human reason above divine revelation. One of the primary objections from the Vatican is the secrecy inherent in Freemasonry. The secret oaths, rituals, and symbols have long been a source of deep suspicion. The Church argues that such binding oaths made in secret to an organization with unknown aims are illicit and dangerous. It questions what needs to be hidden if the organization's goals are truly noble and good. This secrecy is interpreted not as a private matter of a fraternal order, but as a conspiratorial veil hiding activities hostile to the Church and the established social order. The rituals, which draw on non-Christian sources and allegories, are seen as a form of alternative worship that competes with the sacraments of the Church. Furthermore, the Church condemns what it perceives as religious indifferentism within the lodges. By welcoming men of all faiths and requiring only a generic belief in a supreme being, Freemasonry is accused of promoting the idea that all religions are more or less equal. For the Catholic Church, which holds that it is the one true church founded by Jesus Christ, this is a grave error. It sees this Masonic principle not as tolerance, but as a relativist view that undermines the unique truth claims of Christianity. The idea of the great architect of the universe is seen as a deistic and impersonal concept far removed from the personal Trinitarian God of Christian revelation. This long-standing conflict is not merely a historical footnote, it continues to shape perceptions of Freemasonry today. The centuries of condemnation have created a deep-seated cultural suspicion, particularly in Catholic countries. The Church's warnings have fueled the belief that Masonry is, at best, a secular humanist rival to religion, and at worst an anti-clerical or even satanic organization. While Masons insist their fraternity is not a religion and does not interfere with a member's religious duties, the Vatican remains firm. It sees an unbridgeable gap between the path of the Church and the secretive, relativistic path of the Lodge, creating a permanent state of tension. One of the most important rules within a Masonic lodge is the strict prohibition of political discussion. This rule is known as one of the ancient charges or regulations of the craft. The lodge is intended to be a place of harmony and peace, a neutral ground where men can meet as brothers, leaving the divisive arguments of the outside world at the door. Discussions about partisan politics or specific candidates and policies are explicitly forbidden during meetings. The aim is to preserve the unity of the Brotherhood, which could easily fracture if members were to engage in heated political debate. The focus must remain on Masonic teachings, charity, and fellowship, not on who should govern the state. This principle of political neutrality is a cornerstone of Masonic identity. The fraternity's constitutions clearly state that a Mason is to be a peaceful subject to the civil powers and is never to be concerned in plots or conspiracies against the peace and welfare of the nation. However, this does not mean that Masons are expected to be apolitical in their private lives. On the contrary, Freemasonry encourages its members to be active and responsible citizens. A Mason is expected to fulfill his civic duties, including voting and participating in his community, but he must do so as an individual, guided by his own conscience, not as an agent of the lodge. Despite these rules, Freemasonry has had a significant, albeit indirect, influence on history and politics. Many prominent figures who shaped the modern world were members of the fraternity, including leaders of the American Revolution, like George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. Their Masonic ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity undoubtedly informed their political philosophies. The Enlightenment values nurtured in the lodges, reason, tolerance, and individual rights, were the very same values that fueled revolutionary movements in America and France. The lodge provided a network where influential men could meet, share ideas, and build trust, which sometimes translated into political action outside the lodge. It is crucial, however, to distinguish this indirect influence from direct control. The fraternity itself does not formulate political policy or endorse candidates. George Washington acted as a leader of the Continental Army and as president, not as a representative of his Masonic lodge. The influence was personal and philosophical, not institutional. The ideas and networks fostered within Masonry helped shape the world, but the organization did not operate as a political cabal pulling the strings of government from behind the scenes. This distinction is often lost in popular narratives, which tend to confuse the actions of individual Masons with the official actions of Freemasonry as a whole. The enduring belief in Masonic conspiracies stems largely from the fraternity's most defining characteristic, its secrecy. From its inception, Freemasonry has used private rituals, secret modes of recognition like handshakes, and allegorical symbols that are not fully explained to the public. This air of mystery has been a fertile breeding ground for suspicion. People naturally question what needs to be hidden. In the absence of clear information, imagination and fear fill the void. The secret oaths of loyalty that members take are particularly alarming to outsiders, who see them as binding men to an unknown power, placing their allegiance to the lodge above their duty to their country or their church. This suspicion is amplified by the sheer number of powerful and influential men who have been members throughout history. The membership roles have included kings, presidents, prime ministers, judges, and industrial titans. When people see that the elite of society are part of a secret organization, it is easy to leap to the conclusion that this group is secretly running the world. The idea of a secret government or a shadowy cabal becomes more plausible when the members of that secret society are already in positions of public power. This creates a perfect storm for conspiracy theories, blending the fear of the unknown with resentment towards the powerful. These conspiracy theories often portray Freemasonry as a monolithic global entity with a singular nefarious agenda, such as establishing a new world order. However, this image is fundamentally inaccurate. In reality, Freemasonry is not a single, centrally controlled organization. It is a collection of independent Grand Lodges, each sovereign in its own jurisdiction, with significant variations in ritual and rules. There is no international headquarters, or a single Masonic pope directing a global plot. The lack of this central structure makes the idea of a coordinated worldwide conspiracy completely impractical, yet this reality does little to deter those who are convinced of its existence. Ultimately, the belief in Masonic conspiracies persists because it provides simple answers to complex questions. It is easier to blame a secret group for societal problems than to grapple with the messy, complicated realities of economics, politics, and human nature. The symbols of Freemasonry, like the all-seeing eye found on the United States dollar bill, are reinterpreted as proof of a hidden agenda, even though their historical and Masonic meanings are quite different. While the secrecy and elite membership of the fraternity understandably invite questions, the grand conspiracies attributed to it are largely exaggerated fantasies, built on a foundation of misinterpretation and a deep-seated distrust of the unknown.